Our last topic is it's an interesting one that's affecting all of us as we drive around our hamlets and neighborhoods, and we see some of these big box stores going dark, and there's a big impact on that, especially the food anchored. All the other stores that are in that center are basically using that food anchor to drive traffic in there. And we're also kind of surprising is sort of like the precursor to the online internet company. Sears, 75 years ago, was a mail order company. And they recently have closed a bunch of stores here on Long Island, and they kind of invented the category 75 years ago. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we got where we are, and what's the next things as we go forward. So we have with us President of Kimco Realty, Josh Weinkrantz. And we've got Jeremy Isaacs, he's Vice President of Ripco Real Estate, and Bram Weber, he's a partner over at the Weber Law Group. And it was nice talking to everybody here in the break, and I hear that so many of you have some good takeaways, and you've learned for some of these. And myself, I learn a lot by being part of this as well. I didn't originally think to have a land use attorney on here, but in talking to Josh, prior to coming here about, what would be successful, reuses, he said, look, we could come up with the best idea in the world for the property, but if the municipality doesn't allow it, we can't do it. So we got Bram here, adding a nice little addition to it, so thank you very much. Okay, so how did we evolve to the point where we are now? Because, you can count Bed Bath & Beyond is retracted, and I'm not a retail expert, so you guys know the companies better than I, but I know Sears and Kmart's and a number of the big boxes have had problems, and it almost seems like they're big enough companies that they should have been able to sort of like steer clear and kind of deal with what was happening. Amazon, we're talking, has been around for a long, long time. It's not like they just popped up. And their expansion, they started as really selling books, right, originally, and have expanded into cluttering up my front porch probably every single day. But if you could talk, and again, and this format is just very open, talk about, so how did we get to where we are? What's happening with, I remember online used to be the place to go to get the absolute cheapest thing. Now it's like almost the most convenient thing. You order something and a day it's at your door. So just talk a little bit about the evolution of where we are, and then we're going to get into the actual sort of real estate big box part. What has changed in the consumer preferences? Borrower preferences, and I guess how things are being presented. That sort of got us into this where we have, you've always had stores going out, but here just seems to be so many at one given time.
Well, I think you have a lot of different things that happened over the last 10 or 20 years that at this point in time are all kind of coming together. To start with, before you really had online shopping like you have today, prior to the cell phone, online shopping wasn't what it is now. Apple first came out with the cell phone 10, 12 years ago. So what seems like a long time ago really wasn't. And it was that device that really spurred internet shopping and price comparison and all this stuff. Before that, it was a much smaller phenomenon. When you go back to the 90s, when you had all the big box retailers expanding and all these power centers that were being built, and really before at the time where you had kind of this online shopping, everything was about selection, price, and convenience, right? That's how Target exploded, Best Buy, Jeremy knows, all the guys that they were doing deals with in the 90s, these big box guys. It was all about the number of SKUs, selection, and price. So they expanded all over the place. Over time, a couple things happened. The online shopping phenomena grew. Cell phone came out, everybody's able to shop online. You have Amazon that comes out. You have this oversupply that's happening with all these big box retailers are opening up power centers everywhere else. But the dynamic of the market is now starting to shift. You have retailers during that time that not only expanded, but they never thought to see what was coming in the future. They never innovated. They always thought it was going to be about selection and price.
Right.
They never innovated what they did. They just kept building stores. And over time, all of that started to come together to a point where you are now. Oh, and I added one more thing. Retailer debt, right? Debt loads kind of loaded up, and retailers, as they're expanding, they're bringing on more debt. It limited their ability to invest in other types of technology and really innovate and evolve. And all that stuff kind of is started to come together a couple years ago, where now you have, oversupply of many of these big box retailers. They're being squeezed by Amazon and the internet. They're being squeezed by lack of innovation. They never changed the way they operated their stores. They always thought it was going to be about selection and price, and that is not true anymore. And all these things started to happen, loaded up with debt. They can't evolve, they can't change, and the market shifted. And so now what you have is a lot of retailers who have too much retail square footage, too many stores. They didn't innovate. They don't have the money or the capital to reinvest in their stores and add the right type of technology that they need to be competitive. Amazon became way more competitive. Now they're offering free one-day shipping, and it's very hard to compete. And so what has happened over the last couple years is you've seen some retailers fail. You've seen some retailers really try to resize their store portfolio, reduce square footage, reduce store count. You've seen others invest a massive amount of money into the technology side to try to be competitive with Amazon and other online retailers. And it's put the retail shopping center business in a position where we have to be very mindful and forward-thinking about how we reposition our portfolios to really have the best retailers and the ones that are going to be successful in the future, because we know today that they all will not be successful. And we could all probably think about the ones that do well and the ones that don't, and we try to reposition our portfolio to be set up for the future. But it really is all these things that kind of came together now that's causing, I think, this problem.
So as a consumer, right, you get to pick your movie theater seat now like you do like an airline seat. They're reclining. You don't have to come and watch all those commercials. You could get there like at the last second when the movie starts. You could go to the mall and go into the Tesla store. They hand you an iPad. You can order the car right there. Talking about being able to order something online, have it show up in 2 days now, in 1 day whenever they're starting that. When I go on vacation, I used to always rent a car. No matter where I went, I just rented a car. We Uber all the time now, so I can't remember the last time I actually rented a car. So things have changed, but they seem to have gotten more convenient. The big box, I'm finding myself where originally I liked when Home Depot first came here because I lived near Huntington Village, and the local hardware store wasn't open on Sundays. How could you be a hardware store and not open on Sundays? But it's a local guy, he can open whenever he wants. So when Home Depot came, it was a good thing, but I do find myself sort of searching out Ace Hardware now because you could park real close in front of it, you go in, the people are educated, they were in Home Depot and they seem less so now. If you're in the plumbing department, before it used to be a plumber, that would help you, or an ex-plumber doing some side work. So things have really sort of morphed. How did Sears kind of get caught? You know, they sort of had half of the model there with being able to get things. I mean, they had online, they had loyalty programs, they had great penetration. How did they kind of get caught in this?
They didn't innovate. I mean, it really comes down to one thing. If you look at Sears and Walmart, you know, they're really two opposites. At one point, they were very competitive. Walmart was Sears' major competitor. Walmart has continuously invested in technology, innovation, trying to really, you know, boost their online presence and, you know, really try to be competitive with online and Amazon, where Sears and Kmart, they didn't do anything. They didn't invest in their stores at all. I mean, we all have been in Kmart's and Sears, and there's no reason to shop there. There's no experience. The product is not what you want. The price is not competitive. They did not innovate, and ultimately, they failed and probably will fail long term. Walmart, on the other hand, did innovate. They reinvested a tremendous amount of capital into their infrastructure and really tried to stay current. And I think that is the difference.
Right. So you mentioned something about, you know, Kmart, that you don't have an experience, you know, when you go there. I remember 15, 20 years ago, you know, the mantra was, you know, the regional malls are killing the downtowns. Now the downtowns are killing the regional malls. So there's been, you know, 180-degree sort of turn in there. So Jeremy, how are you seeing retail, you know, sort of change? It was getting tighter for a while because medical users that used to go into office buildings, medical office buildings, said, you know what? I want to be in a retail center. I want to be in a strip. You had, you know, the urgent care. A lot of the specialties kind of got out of the office, got into the retail. So it was sort of like bolstering that up, and then all of a sudden we had this. So what are you hearing from the street out there from tenants and from landlords?
Right. So what is going on right now is not unusual in the retail sector. If you go back to, you know, 1930 to 1970, the largest retailer in the United States with 12,000 stores was A&P. Okay? They were also the largest grocer. So you have retailers who will consistently go out of business for the reasons that Josh has mentioned. Bradley's, Caldor, Service Merchandise, Rickle, Channel, Pathmark, Two Guys, Corvettes, names that you haven't heard in years, you know, but...
Service Merchandise.
That was your favorite store?
I love Service Merchandise.
So it's just a constant evolution. Retailers are finding now with FedEx and UPS and direct shipping, they don't need as big of a store. They don't need as big of a back room, a storage area. They're able to shrink their square footage. They now have customer pickups where people can order online, pick it up if they want that. So the business is constantly changing. There's a lot of showrooming where people come in with their iPhone, they look at the price, they'll scan the barcode, they'll do that. Retailers have started to change that, where the barcodes are very unique just to that retailer. Best Buy has figured that out. And, you know, it's an exciting time for a consumer. They have more information than they've ever had on a product when they go into a store. Prices are down. It's kept inflation down. And there's opportunities. And there's opportunities for new retailers to come into the market. Long Island, it used to be in the past, the only way to get into Long Island was through a retail bankruptcy where you bought the leases. When Caldor went bankrupt, Kohl's came in here and bought 33 leases. Today, no one would buy leases. There's no value in the leases. They can do better deals directly with the landlords. So you're starting to see that. You've got new retailers coming in, new restaurants coming in. You've got Floor & Decor just opened their first store in Farmingdale. You've got At Home who's coming in. They're 80,000 feet. Floor & Decor is 80,000 feet. You've got Chick-fil-A who've opened 3 or 4, and they're some of their highest volume restaurants in their chain. And there's going to be others who will come here eventually because the barriers to entry to New York are not as great as they once were. So there's opportunities, and things are definitely looking good for the retail market.
So are we, anybody remember a store, it was in Mitchell Field, it was in the mid-1990s called Incredible Universe?
Yep.
Remember that? So that was owned by Tandy Corporation,
Right.
who also owned Radio Shack. And I mean, that's sort of like everything we talk about now, 2019, back in 1995. The only reason I remember the year, it's like when Windows 95 came out, where sort of like that was everybody's big push into the computer market. But you went there for like hours, and you played on the Xbox, and you had lunch over there, and it was very experiential. And then it pulled out. So was it before its time? Do you think we'll see? I mean, it's sort of like a little mall within itself.
Right.
Do we see something like that coming back? Is there a place for something, of that magnitude?
In certain categories, there may be a need for a big store. Today, we do Target's work in the Northeast, and Target used to be 145,000 feet. Today, they want to be 25 to 40. And we've opened a lot of these stores. They're very successful. They're taking the best-selling items, and they're putting them in the store. You're not going to find 10 toothpaste. You're going to find 2 or 3. So this is what's changing today. Retailers are becoming a lot more efficient. They're turning their inventory a lot quicker, and they're adjusting to the consumer needs with the online pickup, direct delivery, and just being very, very flexible out there today.
Let me just say one thing interesting about that I read recently. You probably can speak even better to this than I can. But so Macy's came up with this concept. They bought a company called Story. I don't know if you've read this, but if you're studying retail, so this company Story, what they do is these kind of store within a store. Now Macy owns it. So they've got 7,500 square feet at Herald Square, and basically it's described as nothing you need, but stuff you might want. And it's completely Instagrammable. So to your point before about what the next generation, this Gen Z, which is age 4 to 22, who they're saying, from what I'm reading, business publications actually are interested in going to stores, but they want to walk into the store and get hit with a coupon on their phone, and they want to be able to take a picture of themselves in front of something cool in a store. That's what that next generation wants. But this concept Story, the merchandise is being changed out every few months. They're going to demolish the installation in the store, again, it's 7,500 square feet. They're going to demolish it and bring in new things that people can take to sell, and also how it's designed, every 2 or 3 months. And it's just going to be refreshed and refreshed in order to create some sort of new environment for people to come in.
So do we, is Mitch Pally here? Did Mitch leave? So Brookhaven Supervisor Ed Romaine would talk to Mitch Pally about this particular topic, reinventing big box. So in their zoning, they prohibit residential within a retail district. So what he was looking for was like 1 or 2 examples of that happening in Brookhaven. And he says, look, we'll fast track if someone wants to integrate residential in with the retail, and allow them to do it, so we sort of have 1 or 2 test cases if we want to do this on a broader base. It was actually difficult to find people that were willing on the landlord side to do that within there, because either they've turned around the center already or they didn't have it dark.
Or there might be some other reason too, and this is a way, because I'm very familiar with that, which is sometimes the concept is good, but the things get lost in the details.
Right.
Which is some of the restrictions or regulations that might be put in such a overlay zoning code. And we talked before about form-based zoning, which is a terrific concept, and I commend you, Supervisor, for implementing that. But sometimes what we find is there's not enough of a conversation between the municipality and private business. Municipality comes up or government comes up with this great idea, and they kind of want to implement it themselves without actually speaking to the private sector and understanding from the private sector how that can work.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things we see in that specific instance is what's happening is, you know, it's got to be a vacant center, okay? So you got to find a completely vacant center, and you have to be able to work within the confines of what a landlord or property owner can and wants to do, but there's got to be more of a dialogue.
Right.
And there also has to be, the market dynamic has to be right, where it's one thing to say we're going to allow residential to be put on this property, but the market dynamics have to work in terms of, you know, rental rates and cost of construction. And, you know, if the property isn't located where those dynamics are workable, there's no project there.
Right. You know, we've had some examples that, you know, that I've been following. So Broadway Mall in Hicksville. It's as far as I can remember, which is a long way. It's always been an underperforming. You know, they put in IKEA, which was separate from the mall. I mean, the whole thing about the mall is, if you wanted to put IKEA like in the middle, that you had to walk through every other store to get to IKEA. The way they did it is you could go to IKEA, leave IKEA, and never stop in for pizza or, you know, get anything, you know, within the mall. They put Target on another end cap, you know, so anything you could buy within the mall, you could buy half price at Target, you know, so another, you know, another mistake there. And there also you were, you know, within a quarter mile of the train station, Hicksville train station, which I think has the highest ridership of any station on the island. And you got Macy's there, and you have some of the other big boxes that looks like that would be set up nicely to have residents living over the retail, over the restaurants, that could use the train and that whole downtown. There's also an infrastructure with buses, you know, over there as well. It just seems insane that we sort of missed the boat on that whole thing.
And there is, I mean, we talked before also about these downtown grants, and another one was just announced, but Oyster Bay has a $10 million downtown grant for Hicksville, but the Broadway Mall is outside of that zone.
Right.
So it's only concentrated immediately around the train station.
Right.
And that also is been a multi-year process trying to get that going, because you have competing interests in Hicksville. You have people that are very much for wanting to see something happen there. They feel that they've seen other downtowns redeveloped and reinvigorated and re-energized, and they've missed the boat on that, and they want to be able to enjoy that same success. But you also still have a tight community in that neighborhood, in that area, who don't want to see anything. The traffic is too bad on the roadway and so forth. So when you have competing interests like that, it's difficult for a municipality to figure out the path forward.
Yeah, one thing with Oyster Bay, you know, they're late to the party, but there's a lot of examples of success that they could sort of, you know, emulate. You know, they have been very open in speaking to developers before concreting what their plans are over there. So the current administration, I think, sort of gets it. But, you know, it's sort of funny. A couple of weekends ago, I live in Cold Spring Harbor, which is like very close to Huntington Village. So we just always go to Huntington Village, you know, Friday, Saturday night for dinner or whatever. So we met a couple in Oyster Bay. So we ate downtown Oyster Bay and Audrey. It was a Wild Honey. And it's Saturday night, and there was nobody walking around the town. There was nothing there. It was like a ghost town. So here you have a community that's on the waterfront, has a train station, is a, you know, quaint, beautiful little area. The component that's missing is market rate rentals.
All you need to do is go south from there and look at the big Avalon sign that sits on what is now
Yeah.
a car storage property.
Right.
I mean, we all remember that story where Avalon tried to come.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was you know, wrong time, wrong everything there.
Yep.
And it just wasn't something that was embraced, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But you would have had that. That could have been the ignition for that type of growth, and maybe that will come over time. It just sometimes that may not have been the right time then, but maybe
Right.
maybe now or in the near future will be the right time.
Yeah. I mean, so Oyster Bay's got the opportunity in a couple of locations of dramatically transforming their tax base, right, the employment base, rejuvenating a downtown that's beautiful, very attractive, has a lot of structural assets, again, the water, train station, you know, right there. It almost seems like it's in a time vacuum that sort of people are kind of missing. What are we, so what are we seeing going forward? So we're seeing examples of the big box. So obviously, it's sort of glaring in your face when you drive by and there's a big, you know, there's a big vacancy. But it sounds like it's not as alarming as it is. There's been a transformation. So what are we seeing going forward? Like what's going to be the next area? Like, you know, we were talking a little bit about Jericho Turnpike. You know, you drive down Jericho Turnpike, that was like the biggest planning mistake you could ever possibly make. Every commercial property is 100 foot deep, you know, by 170 miles long. What do you do with that? But do we see like the Meisner Park, the lifestyle centers? Do we think that type of stuff, and Bram, maybe, I know you've been on one side or the other on a couple of these, but.
Always on one side.
Always on one
Always
side.
on the right side. Never. Let's get the record straight.
Do
I know they're
we
not different.
see that type of a change in retail coming in?
I think there's a very unique opportunity right now with all the big box vacancies on Long Island. There are over 40 boxes right now, 40,000 feet or larger, vacant on Long Island. And that's down from the height, which was about 55. And a lot of those spaces are being reworked, some for medical. They're very big parcels of land, the freestanding buildings. You're able to go in, get some rezonings, go in for residential. Some of them are in downtown locations. We had a Walbaum's in downtown Lindenhurst. Landlords right by the railroad station, landlords going in for residential. So yeah, there is a very unique opportunity because most of these leases were very long leases. Most landlords never thought they would get the properties back. So they're taking the time to figure out what to do with it, what's the highest and best use today. It may not be retail, and that's good for the community. You know, if it's a health club, whether it's medical, whether it's apartments, you know.
I mentioned before how many square feet of office and industrial. How many square feet of retail is there?
2.5 million.
In
In vacancy right now in the
No,
big box?
it's 2.5 million in vacancy, but what's the whole supply?
I don't know exactly what that
Okay.
because there's Class A, Class B.
Right.
But
And
if you
got
just look at
strip.
what I focus on is the big box right now. There's 2.5 million feet of vacant big box.
Right, okay.
And you know, that's a big opportunity to do some replanning. Obviously, the Sears boxes are very unique because they're multi-level, and it takes time and a lot of capital. In East Northport, the Sears store there, they're putting in AMC theaters and 24-hour fitness on the second floor. They still have the ground floor available. In Hicksville, they're working with the town. Town would like them to do kind of a lifestyle center with the retail facing in, with apartments above. You know, there's opportunity. It's just everyone needs to work together to find out what is going to be best for the next 50 years.
I think we're at a point now where a lot of different constituencies are seeing the value of mixed-use retail or mixed-use real estate. You have the residential component, which wants to live in a mixed-use environment.
Right.
You have retailers now that are more open to being located with residential. Years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case. They wanted to be in big box centers with other retailers. Today, they're more comfortable with the residential component. You have landlords who see the value in owning and redeveloping retail real estate to a mixed-use format. So you have a lot of these dynamics starting to come together, and now we just need the municipalities to kind of acknowledge and see the fact that there is demand for this and that they can spur growth and that you have all the different components that really want it to happen.
Right.
We just have to find the right locations and the right zoning to make it work.
So Bram, how do we educate the municipalities, the home rule, to sort of understand and to help communicate to their constituents, you know, how this stuff works, how it should work? You know, the guy in the apartment is eventually going to buy your house, when you retire.
And vice versa. The
Yeah.
person who retires and sells their house wants to live in a walkable
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. Yeah, no, actually, my parents, who both are living, 85 years old, who normally would have lived out their life in a single-family home, went to a retirement community, bought a unit in a retirement community, and love it. Love the social aspects of it. Love it when it snows and they don't have to go out and do anything. But they were never aware of any other different lifestyle until they saw some of their friends going over there, and then it was like exactly what you're saying is now there's a choice. And that's what we're talking about here, and not just the generation X, Y, Z millennials. It's are they the first baby boomers? What's the 85-year-olds? I don't know, whatever they were.
I know, but you have those two groups. You have the baby boomers who are, getting to that age, and now you have, on the other end, you have millennials who
Right.
also don't want to live in single-family homes. They want
Right.
to live in more vibrant communities. Many of them don't want to own cars anymore. They want to Uber everywhere. They want to walk. It's a whole different
Yeah.
dynamic, and you have those two forces kind of wanting this type of product, and now you want retailers who understand that in order for them to grow sales and do more business, they need to be in these experiential environments where their people are living and working and playing, and that's where they want to be located. So you have all these different forces coming together looking for these types of projects.
Yeah, because it's not all about saving money now, because like I was telling you before, I'm so happy to go to the movie theater and have a reclining seat and get there at the last second, and I think we're paying like triple what we were paying before.
Right.
But I'm like happy to do it, so the experience is a huge part of all this. So where do we see the next sort of like evolution, and not evolution, so evolution, not revolution. So we're evolving now, and there's strips, centers, there's malls, there's neighborhood centers and power centers, and what are we going to see the change in next, do you think?
I think stores will continue to get smaller. They'll become more efficient. You will, as you're starting to see now, you're seeing more health clubs in all the centers. Retailers before did not want to be with a gym or a health club. Now there's a widely accepted fact that they want to be there. They do bring traffic, both in the mornings and the evenings. And you'll just have a constant, the online retailers are now opening stores to get a physical presence. And it's constantly changing, and it's good.
Right.
There's an interesting fact about the online retailers opening stores that they've done a lot of studies, and online retailers who open stores see that their online business from the demographic area where they open that store improves by 37%. So all these online retailers are now starting to realize that they're kind of limited in terms of their sales growth online, and they need to open stores. And existing brick and mortar retailers who have an online component, the reverse is also true. It's a little more dramatic, where if they close a retail store, they see their online sales from that demographic drop by as much as 77%.
Wow.
So everybody is starting to realize that they all have to work together, and you're seeing now a lot of online retailers opening brick and mortar going the other way as well.
Right. So, I mean, we've always seen the Apple stores, right? So they're big online. There's an Amazon Go in Stony Brook University, right? There's Dell Computer has had kiosks in the malls for a long period of time. So you do want to see, I mean, I'm starting to see where, going to a grocery store, like I enjoy going to Trader Joe's more than I enjoy going to Stop and Shop. There's different type of products. It's a little more boutique-y. There's the Wild by Nature, and there's Southdown markets. Similarly, I think I mentioned before, I like going to Ace Hardware versus sort of like the Home Depot. It's just kind of like more convenient, and when you're speaking with someone, you're getting some better information on there. So do we see the online, let's say grocery, right? So certain people want to pick their fruit and vegetables, but for cereal, for bread, for more of the staple type stuff, are you seeing that they're using Peapod for that stuff and then going to the store just for the others? Are we seeing sort of like a change in that area?
I think in New York City and the boroughs, you see a lot of the deliveries with, to the apartment buildings.
Direct.
Fresh Direct, or the Amazon lockers. I don't know if any of you have ever seen an Amazon locker. You walk into a Whole Foods now, you'll see an Amazon locker in there where you're able to buy something online, it's shipped to that locker, and then you got a certain period of time to go get it. It's very popular in the city where there are no doorman buildings, so there's no one to accept your package. It's really ingenious, and a lot of landlords are putting Amazon lockers. I think you probably are in some of your centers. No, okay, so
No.
but they do pay rent, and they do bring people to the center who may end up buying something else while they're there. But it's very interesting times. It's not unusual in the business. Look, when Walmart started and opened their first store in 1960, the top 10 retailers that were around then are not around today. So it's a constant change, and it's for the good.
Now, I want to say one thing. You mentioned, you asked the question before, but you can chance to answer it about with the municipalities and trying to get how to move this forward. And it's two things, and I think it's one thing that Josh said before also, which is it needs to happen somewhere. When there's an example, so people, when they talk about downtowns now, they talk to Patchogue is really the first downtown. You've talked about Huntington. So we need to see it happen somewhere. Residential incorporated into a retail property, residential incorporated into an office property like you're trying to work on in Melville area in Huntington.
Right.
We need to see it happen. And then once it happens and it's successful, I think it becomes an educational tool for elected officials and communities that it can happen, and when it does happen, it'll be good and not bad. So I think those are the two things. We just have to find the right location, as Josh said, and start to introduce these things, these concepts slowly, and then show the municipalities and their constituents that they can work.
Right. So do we see any upsets in the online side? So we've talked about some of the bigger online companies. You've got Alibaba, who's, was sort of like a phenom a couple of years ago. It's sort of now more quietly growing, where it's cutting out even more of the middlemen. Are we seeing any dynamic change in the online world that we, now? I know you're saying the cell phone thing was big because it's convenient.
I think in any business, there's always change. I mean, when you look at the retail business, we were talking about Sears. At one point, Sears was the world's largest retailer.
Right.
They're no longer around. Walmart took them over. Back in the 80s, in terms of computers, IBM, right, biggest computer company.
Yep.
Microsoft came in, crushed them. There's so many examples like that. Amazon today is the big online retailer. 10, 20 years from now, there could be some other company that we have no idea about today that's going to come in and have a better mousetrap. Maybe it involves only online. Maybe it involves, physical real estate as well. And maybe Amazon, is no longer what it is. I think everything constantly is evolving. And for us in the real estate business, the key is really to try to keep looking forward, try to understand what's coming, and try to position our real estate the best way we can for the future, whether it's with retail re-tenanting, whether it's rezoning, whether it's, just trying to be prepared for the change and the evolution that's coming. If you do the same thing over and over again, you're going to fail.
Right. So will technology change? Like, I'm always in the conflict with my wife. She waits for something to be empty to then go out to the store and buy it. And I usually buy 4 of them. And when I get down to the 3rd one, then I go out and buy another 4 of them. I don't like being inconvenienced. Is there a time that we'll see, like you see some of the GE commercials with the refrigerators, that when you're out on milk, it automatically orders it for you? You never see past that part of the commercial, but will a Peapod then all of a sudden appear when you're getting low on eggs and low on different things?
for me, there's no question that that will happen at some point. Is it 2 years from now, 10 years from now? I don't know. It will absolutely happen. And when that happens, what is happening now in the grocery business, because of it starting to happen, is you have this bifurcation of types of grocers, right? You have the high end or the specialty, grocers who are focusing on produce and prepared foods. And then you have the other end, which is more value oriented, who are focusing on price predominantly. The guys that are stuck in the middle, which are the guys that are going to be impacted the most by all of this predictive ordering stuff, your box of cereal, your paper towels, all this stuff, the middle of the traditional grocery store, those are the guys that are really getting squeezed now, which is why you start to see a lot of consolidation, because the only way they can be competitive is to consolidate with other similar grocers and try to lower their overhead and lower their infrastructure costs so that they can compete with, the specialty guys, the low end, and online. So I do think that's going to happen in the future. It's starting to happen now. We're starting to see it in little pockets, and it will have an impact.
Right. I think the thing that we're seeing people going more towards is convenience. And I remember when we bought our last house, it was a different style house than the previous one, so really none of the furniture matched. So we went to Ethan Allen and walked around the showroom, sat down with the salesperson, and she's like, "Yeah, okay, so what do you like?" So like, okay, room 5, it was like a room, and she's like, "Well, what do you mean room 5?" Well, the lamp, the art that's on the wall, the carpet, that. It was just like an easy thing to do, and it all matched. They had professional people with colors and all that stuff. So I see people are willing to spend more money for the convenience of certain things. Do you see that changing? Like, is the demographic for a gym different than what the demographic was before? Whereas before you didn't want the gym there. I remember I used to work out when I was a kid and had no money. You went there to the gym, didn't buy anything anywhere, and just went back to your car and you went home. So now is that demographic changed where you're stopping in, like in Woodbury, you go into Soul Cycle, then you go into Chopped for lunch, and buying something at one of the boutique, retail.
Right. I think, look, everyone is trying to eat healthier, work out more. We learn about all these new terms, antioxidants, have more fiber and stuff like that. So you definitely see, what's going on now is there's an abundance of health clubs.
Right.
Lifetime, 24-hour fitness, LA Fitness, Blink,
Right.
Retro Fitness, New York
boutique
Sports
guys.
Clubs, and then Soul Cycle, which is, spin classes, and then the boot camps. So everybody is spending more of their disposable money on living healthier and eating healthier. And yes, they will pay more for those services. But when it comes to retail prices, everybody wants to buy online and get the best price.
Right. Okay.
And I think, and just the idea about convenience too, right? I mean, you have, family, 2 working parents. It's very, very difficult now to carve out time to go to a store and go shopping. I mean, if you haven't experienced the Fresh Direct, it's a tremendous technology, and you literally, you could just repeat your order. So what you ordered last week, you can order it again. The same type of milk, and it'll just come to your door, and it's delivered, and if it's cold, it's delivered cold, and it truly is amazing technology. And for people who don't have the time for whatever reason, taking care of a sick relative, whatever it is, it's a very convenient thing. And yes, I think I agree. We're willing to spend more for that convenience now because time seems to be getting more and more limited.
Right. Okay, good. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I've been holding off, and just in the final hour, Bram, I think, hit it right on the head, because I'm taking all this in, and I don't think it's so much about, well, how do we need to reinvent retail per se to make it fit? I think one of the driving forces that really needs to be considered is consumer lifestyle. It's not so much just the simple convenience of buying one thing and being able to have it show up on your doorstep, but today you got, travel, sports, you got 2 working parents, and oftentimes professionals who are working crazy hours. You've got kids' extracurricular activities. I have 2 teenage daughters, and over the years, I've talked to my contemporaries, and they are just running to the point that their heads are spinning because there's no residual leisure time. It's like, for instance, I can touch upon everything that each of you have spoken about. So, for instance, David, you spoke about the fact that you're willing to spend more to sit in a reclining movie theater. Well, because your leisure time now is so much more limited that you want that leisure time to be prime.
Right.
That you're willing to spend for that extra luxury and comfort, because while you're in that limited window of time to enjoy your own time, that's what you're willing to do. Now, to Josh and to Jeremy's points earlier about the big boxes, citing Target more recently and Walmart, the reason why those big boxes survived is because their business model. They came out with a business model that embodied shopping under one roof. You go into those stores, and even now the Costco's and the BJ's now, you can go under one big box and do all your shopping for the day. You can have your kids there, and you can pick out clothes, you can get your durables, you can get your consumables. That's why those shops, so for instance, the Sears, for instance, they never got on board with that concept of bringing other types of shopping that you'd be doing under one roof, being like food or health and beauty aids per se.
Yeah.
That's why they're dying. That's why Target now, although late, they're starting to catch on because they're remodeling their stores now to focus more on, they have a whole market pantry
Yeah.
Platform now. And I think to Bram's final point is that we've become a society that's always on the run, that the online retailers that are now going bricks and mortars as opposed to vice versa, because that brand recognition and consumer confidence in those stores, someone who they've become accustomed to, the convenience and the great experience of shopping online, or even an Omaha Steaks, for instance, they're willing to go into that store to check it out because they've had such great experience, but then the vice versa, they're not going to go into a store that they, that went to online that they didn't have a great retail experience. So I think going forward, I think Jeremy brought up the highest and best use is another key factor, that these big boxes need to be reworked into something. The concepts of the mixed-use communities where people don't have to leave the community to basically live their life, do their food shopping, have the entertainment, be able to do for their kids and for themselves, as opposed to running out.
Yeah, Jeremy, do you have examples? So could you give a couple of examples of like sort of innovative reuses of a couple of big boxes that have happened here? And we'll sort of kind of wrap up on that.
So, in East Meadow, we sold a Wallbaum's to Winthrop Hospital, NYU.
Okay.
When it comes to having that type like a Meisner, we don't have that perfect mousetrap yet.
Right.
It's coming. The downtown communities where like downtown Farmingdale, where you have a tremendous nightlife there and all the bars and all the restaurants.
Now you have it.
Now you have it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what all the towns are trying to do in moderation. Again, they're all concerned about the students, the school districts, raising your taxes. So there needs to be a balancing act. And we don't have one yet on Long Island where you have the retail, the housing, not really yet.
No.
Okay. Yes, Richard.
David, quick question. To any of the panelists, by the way, thank you for your time. What happens to the mom and pops and those retail strips that you were talking about? How do they survive? One, in terms of rent, and two, tax base. And then getting to your point about the big boxes, that's an eroding tax base. So maybe there's an incentive or some leverage there for the towns and municipalities to start thinking about reuse and rezoning because that tax base is eroding. And just for that gentleman, another good example was the Sears in Garden City. NYU took that whole property.
Right.
And I'm more concerned with the mom and pops. I don't know how they survive.
Josh?
I think, on Long Island you have a tremendous population base that will help support a lot of the mom and pops. I think they're no different than the big box retailers in that they have to look forward and innovate. I think service retailers will be fine. You know, the hair salons, the nail salons, the pizza places, all those guys will be fine. Apparel is going to be difficult, but it's not impossible if they provide good customer service and they provide something other than you can get elsewhere. I think they have to look forward. I think if you continue to operate your business like it's 1995, you're going to have a problem. If you look forward and you try to be a little bit innovative and embrace some technology and enhance your customer service, and I think customers today still want that. I don't think that, you know, those guys are going to fail. People don't want poor service. They don't want poor selection. They don't want inconvenience. If you can give them all of those things, I think you can be successful. So I think when it comes to the mom and pop retailers, it's no different than the big box guys. You got to be innovative, you got to look forward, and you got to really service the customer.
How do you see it within your centers? Do you see a turnover? Do you see them being innovative?
Some yes, some no. It's a mixed bag. I would say in general, we're seeing a shift to more service type mom and pop businesses. I think the days of the boutique apparel stores and things like that are few and far between. I think in certain areas they do well, but in many of our properties we're seeing a lot of restaurants, we're seeing a lot of service users, we're seeing a lot of health and wellness. Those are all mom and pop businesses. Many of them are franchise type companies. So they are still vibrant. It's just the nature of what those businesses are is changing.
You know, I think all this movement, even with the mom and pops, what Joshua was saying is the ones that are innovating. Like I gave you the example of the hardware store in Huntington Village. You're closed on Sunday. I mean, the only time I could work on stuff is Saturday and Sunday. You just cut my time in 50%. I remember there was, before Blockbuster Video, there was a video store there. And I remember it snowed one day, and my video was due that day. So I actually walked there, but I was close enough to walk. They were closed, so I couldn't return it. They actually tried to charge me because of a late fee because they didn't have it back. You know, certain ones should go out. Book Review is still there and strong. There's Value Drugs is independent, is strong. The ones, like you said, are responding to, you know, what's going on over there are staying. And I think there's a push, at least with me, to smaller groceries, smaller, you know, to the smaller mom and pops. My 15-year-old, we just signed up. We play soccer and basketball. So we just signed them up with Energy Fitness, who's a local, you know, it's a smaller chain, you know, store. But we didn't go to, you know, LA Fitness. So I think we're looking for that convenience. We're looking for that personal experience and expertise. We'll take one.
Did that hard restaurant close down?
Bill.
With respect to repurposing big box stores for housing, we had an inquiry about a very small mall, and the issue wasn't really the land use planning. That might have become an issue, but before we even got to that, the issue was wastewater district.
Oh, okay.
So have anybody else experienced that? At least in Suffolk County, you don't have sewage, you can't intensify the kind of use to the point where you can put housing.
Every day.
Big box.
Every day, a phone call comes in, I'd like to do this. Well, it depends on where you are. It's going to cost you X amount of dollars in extra Pine Barrens credits for the extra sanitary. I mean, it's just, if you're looking, literally every...
Bigger impediment than the zoning.
Every day, certain vacant buildings for medical uses in certain areas that don't have Pine Barrens credits, or there aren't availability of other sanitary credits. You can't take an empty building and put medical into it or intensify the use with additional restaurants. So in Suffolk County, it's a big challenge.
So for the college students here, so Uber wastewater. You hit the thing, it picks up wastewater. Good.
I love it.
You had a question?
Reduction of use of the family car and the increase in Uber use. Are the towns talking about reducing the restrictions on parking ratios to allow the better land use of the rest of the asphalt that's still running there?
I think that's the next thing coming. I think that you have seen, parking is the big issue. I mean, that is, you've hit on wastewater and parking. Those are the two central issues. So you do see, I think, more flexibility now not yet because of car sharing, more because it's just the requirements for parking have just been too onerous and unnecessary. So you are seeing, I think, a greater flexibility when it comes to parking. I think that's the next thing coming. I think you've hit on it for the next thing coming. I think on Long Island, we haven't seen enough of it yet. But right, when we went over to Hofstra a few weeks ago, there's a whole line of zip cars. I mean, that wasn't that way when I went to law school there.
Right.
So I think your point's correct. I think that's the next thing coming. I think over time we'll see that, and that'll be a very helpful argument to be able to create more available land on what is already paved land, not green space, for reinvention.
All right, good. Well, listen, I'd like to thank you very much for taking your morning out
Thank you.
to be with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy, thank you. Graham, thank you very much. And thank you, all of you, for spending your morning with us as well.